Good day. My name is Craig Wynn. This is the Yahowah blog. I'm delivering this program to you because yesterday, January 1st of 2025, we found that the United States Justice Department representatives, the FBI, and other investigators deliberately, knowingly, and purposefully covered up the motivation of a mass murderer, a man who killed 15 Americans in cold blood. They covered up his motivation deliberately. This was such an egregious act that they knew the motivation and yet they denied it. Said, this is not an act of terrorism. And then, rather than let us see the evidence, they hid it. That's a crime. If they weren't part of the Justice Department, they would be prosecuted for that crime. And yet that's what they did. What we learned is that it was a Muslim who drove his pickup truck over innocent people, murdering 15 of them, and that he was identified with the Islamic State. His name means Greater Syria, which is the conquest and the purpose of the Islamic State of Greater Syria, ISIS. It is inconceivable that they did this, and so I'm sharing with you a number of programs that explain why they did this and what you need to know. The first time that the black flag was recognized in America was in August of 2014. A man tied a black flag such that it was hanging outside of a rundown duplex in suburban New Jersey. This is brought to us by CNN. The person who first saw it could not make out the Arabic, but he recognized the design from news reports about ISIS, in which mass jihadists under the banner of the Islamic State were trying to impose their dark vision of Allah's rule on earth. And actually, it wasn't their dark version or vision of it, but instead the Quranic portrayal of what jihadists must do. Alarmed, this individual sent a picture of the house and its flag to a friend who promptly tweeted it and informed the Department of Homeland Security, which also turned out to be clueless. The flag's owner, the one who posted it, was Mark Dunaway. Now you'd say, oh, probably an Irishman, maybe an Englishman. No, he was a Muslim. He had converted to Islam a decade prior. He explained to the police when they arrived, he lied to them, that he flew the flag to mark Muslim holidays. No, he didn't. Every Muslim, he said, uses that black flag. You will find it in any mosque in the world. It was not true. He knew it, but he deliberately lied. And the Department of Homeland Security, who is supposed to be protecting us from Islamic jihadists, had no way to confront him because they're indoctrinated too, and the truth is withheld from them. I understand now that people turn on CNN and they see that flag, he said, associated with jihad. But that's not my intention. Oh, not at all. It says there's only one God, Allah, and the Prophet Muhammad is his messenger. It's not meant as a symbol of hate. Muslims are told to lie so that they can deceive infidels to the extent that they let down their guard and become easier prey. This has been going on for a very long time. But let's be clear. There is one God. His name is Yahweh. Allah is nothing but a snake. He is no more God than the man in the moon. Allah Akbar actually means Allah is a rat. Muhammad was not a prophet. He didn't get a single prophecy right. Not one. To call him a prophet is to be completely ignorant of what he said. And Islam is a religion of hate. Allah hates life. Allah hates Jews. Allah hates the truth. Allah hates Yahweh. Dunaway, like many Muslims and even Middle East experts, did not know that the flag had been designed by ISIS in 2006. Isn't it amazing how ignorant Middle East experts are, particularly in academia, because they have a story to tell. And evidence and reason don't figure into their story. They want to deceive you, just as did the Justice Department yesterday morning in the streets of New Orleans, standing surrounded by the blood of its citizens. He and others were confused because the Islamic State used terror and Twitter to advertise its brand and Islamic tradition to obscure its meaning. No, they didn't. Same meaning. A jihadist is Islam. Islam is jihad. They are inseparable. Black flags have been part of Islam since Muhammad. Before the group declared itself the Caliphate reborn that summer, it had been ambiguous about the flag, meaning that the cause that it represented. No, they had not. And actually, the Islamic State was born out of the stupidity of the American Awakening program that Petraeus brought up, because he thought it would be wise to arm Sunni Muslims to go fight Al-Qaeda. But Al-Qaeda wasn't in Iraq. Saddam Hussein hated Al-Qaeda, which is why Al-Qaeda told the Saudis that they would be the ones they should choose to oust Saddam Hussein. They were mortal enemies. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. George W. Bush lied about his reasons for sacrificing so many lives in that country, making a bad situation worse. The Islamic State grew out of that awakening program because by arming these Sunni Muslims in a country now dominated by Shiite Muslims, which is why the United States did nothing but give Iraq to Iran, making the entire region unstable, which is the reason that the terrorists now run Syria, because Syria was a client of Iraq before Americans invaded Iraq and gave Iraq to Iran, which then gave them a land bridge into Lebanon so they could supply Hezbollah, their militants, to kill Jews, and then supply the Hamas and Islamic Jihad terrorists also killing Jews. This is the truth, whether you want to agree with it or not. It is actually irrefutable. Well, that was the flag's meaning, and the Islamic State began as the Islamic State in Greater Syria, ISIS. It is shortly thereafter, their ambitions just became to be known as the Islamic State. But because IS didn't seem like a very good acronym, and it was way too Islamic to be comfortable with progressives, they called them ISIS rather than the Islamic State. This caliphate that once ruled everything from Spain to Iran was because of the Islamic conquest, the Islamic wars of compulsion that gave everyone within reach of their swords the choice to convert to Islam or die. And they wanted to return to herald the end of the world. The Islamic State encouraged the second interpretation of this global community of jihadists, and they read into that flag the state that they would impose on the world. The group's cause proved so compelling among jihadists that in 2014, the organization supplanted its former master, Al-Qaeda. That is not true. The Islamic State did not grow out of Al-Qaeda. It was created to fight Al-Qaeda by the United States military. The spread of the flag then traces the spread of the idea chronicles the changing of the guard in global jihadist movement. I said at the time that if you were to wipe out every member of Al-Qaeda and you were to kill Osama bin Laden, it would make no difference. This war against Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden is as foolish as fighting a war against Hamas and Hezbollah. They are simply symptoms of the greater problem, which is the religion of Islam. When the Islamic State first announced itself on January 15th, 2006, they had no flag of their own. But 2 months later, in January 2007, they released a picture of the Islamic State's new flag. Anonymous authors affiliated with the Islamic State explained that its design, quoting passages from the Islamic scriptures and historical accounts, was the flag of the Prophet. Peace and blessings be upon him. It is a black square made of striped wool. According to one account, another describes Muhammad standing from the pulpit preaching, surrounded by fluttering black flags. On the flag of the Prophet was written, "No God but God." No, it's actually, the intent is to say, "No God but Allah." And Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. The flag had a name. Yes, Muhammad called it the eagle because he viewed himself as leading legions against all who wouldn't capitulate. Although the authors acknowledged the reports of green, white, and yellow flags, there weren't yellow flags, they were black, white, and red flags. They concluded that the Islamic State flag would be black because most of the reports about Muhammad mentioned a black flag, both black and white. He chose them based upon whether he was leading the terrorist raid or if he was simply sending his goons off to slaughter others on his orders. What's written on the flag is what was written by the messenger of God. Peace and blessings be upon him. He was a ruthless terrorist. There are no blessings. And as for his character, he was a rapist, pedophile, and mass murderer. The story is then covered up, assuaged, if you will, by Muslims who would like to lure people into believing that the black flag of the Islamic State really has nothing to do with Muhammad. It's simply imagined. One wrote, the first one found when doing a Google search, the black flag is nowhere mentioned in the Quran. There isn't even a single intimidation in the Quran that promotes the use of a black flag or regards it as holy or sacred. What then makes the black flag a positive symbol to be capitalized by the contemporary radical movements? He asked. The fact of the matter is, and he knew the truth. In the Sirah, the first book written about Muhammad, the oldest record of Muhammad's sayings and his actions, his terrorist raids, of which there were 75, is Ibn Ishaq's Sirah, and the black flag is mentioned throughout it. Muhammad used it when he was leading a terrorist raid against non-Muslims. On a subsequent program, I will share examples of that with you so that you know the truth. This Muslim didn't want you to know it. And there is no such thing as a radical movement. There's no radicalization of Muslims. All good Muslims are terrorists. That is what the Quran says. That is the Quran's definition of a good Muslim. The Quran says that a bad Muslim is peaceful. They're moderates. And then it tells the good Muslims to kill the peaceful, moderate Muslims, which the Quran says are hypocrites, so that Allah can personally torture their souls and their bodies forever in hell. This person would have you believe that the answer is in a few hadith reports, teachings, deeds, and sayings of the Prophet recorded in the books of hadith, Muhammad's prophet's tradition, Islam's second most authoritative source. The fact of the matter is the Quran and hadith come from exactly the same sources. They were delivered exactly the same way, and they convey exactly the same message. The religion cannot be practiced without the hadith, because you cannot know Muhammad's example in the Quran tells Muslims they must follow his example. His example is only presented in the hadith. The hadith offer prophecies that emerge of an army that will come from the region of Afghanistan and Central Asia, Iran, and parts of Pakistan today, flying the black flag before the end of the world. From this army, the Muslim Mahdi, the Messiah, he writes, will arise and lead it to achieve decisive victory against the enemies of Islam, to finally restore the glory of Islam. Islam has never been glorious. The golden years of Islam is that first 100 years after Muhammad's death, where they raped and plundered the known world. It was all stolen gold. The hadith also calls on Muslims to support and join the army of the black flag when it appears. This is his story. It is all a lie. And in a subsequent program, I'm going to share with you the first emergence of the black flag in Islam. It is the most horrid story. It is actually the beginning of the religion, where Muhammad decided that he wanted to raid for the purpose of not religion, but for personal profit as a thief. A caravan, a private enterprise of his own kin, and to attack them. He led a band of militants out with a black flag, and I will share that story with you in a subsequent program. But before I do that, I want to share this thought in closing today. The United States Justice Department deliberately withheld information because they knew that a Muslim allied with the Islamic State had committed mass murder and had ended the lives in cold blood of 15 Americans. And they didn't want you to know his motivations. Well, I will tell you, he was a Muslim, a good Muslim. And Mr. Jabbar was following Allah's orders and Muhammad's example. That is why he flew the black flag of Islam. I am Craig Wynn, and this has been the Yahowah blog.